Imagine surviving in temperatures that drop to -40 degrees. No electricity. No central heating. No modern insulation. Just you, your family, and the howling Arctic winds that could kill you in minutes. This wasn't a survival challenge or extreme camping trip. This was everyday life for the Vikings. But here's the incredible part. While the rest of medieval Europe was freezing in drafty stone castles, the Vikings had engineered something far more ingenious. They literally built themselves into the earth, creating underground fortresses that could maintain comfortable temperatures even when blizzards raged outside for months. Welcome to FROSTIVIAN, where we explore how ancient civilizations conquered the coldest, most brutal environments on Earth. Today, we're diving deep into one of history's most underrated architectural marvels, the Viking turf house. And trust me, what you're about to discover will completely change how you think about survival, sustainability, and human ingenuity. By the end of this video, you'll understand why modern architects are actually studying these thousand-year-old designs to solve today's energy crisis. So stick around because this gets fascinating. Let's set the scene. It's the year 900 AD. You're a Viking settler in Iceland, Greenland, or northern Scandinavia. The landscape is breathtaking but absolutely merciless. During winter, you face temperatures routinely dropping below -20°C, constant winds exceeding 50 miles per hour, snowstorms lasting days or even weeks, only 4 hours of weak daylight at the winter solstice, and frozen ground that makes agriculture nearly impossible. And here's the brutal truth: you don't have much to work with. Scandinavia and Iceland have limited forests. Trees are sparse, stunted by the harsh climate. Stone is abundant but freezing cold and difficult to work with. Metal tools are precious and rare. So how do you build a home? How do you create shelter that will protect your family through 9-month winters? How do you stay warm when a single mistake in construction could mean death? The Vikings looked at their harsh environment and did something genius. Instead of fighting against nature, they worked with it. They looked down at the earth beneath their feet and realized the solution was literally right under them. And that's where the turf house was born. Viking turf houses weren't just homes built on the ground. They were partially underground structures, sometimes with floors excavated 3 to 4 feet below the surface level. Why? Because the earth itself is an incredible insulator. Below the frost line, the ground maintains a relatively stable temperature year-round, usually between 5 to 10 degrees Celsius. By building down instead of just up, Vikings automatically gained natural insulation that modern homes spend thousands trying to achieve with foam and fiberglass. But the engineering didn't stop there. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Viking turf houses used a multi-layer wall system that would impress modern architects. First, they'd construct an inner wooden frame from whatever timber they could obtain. This created the structural skeleton and living space. These wooden posts and beams were carefully selected from driftwood or the few available trees, making every piece precious. Next came the insulation layer. Vikings would pack the space between the inner frame and outer wall with dried moss, seaweed, or animal wool. This created dead air space that trapped heat inside during winter and kept interiors cool during brief summers. Then came the revolutionary part: the turf walls themselves. Vikings would cut blocks of turf from grasslands, each block measuring roughly 1 foot by 2 feet and about 4 inches thick. These weren't just chunks of dirt. They were living, interconnected layers of grassroots, soil, and vegetation that formed incredibly strong, cohesive units. These turf blocks were stacked like bricks, sometimes creating walls 3 to 6 feet thick. The grass roots held everything together naturally, creating a dense barrier against wind and cold. And here's the brilliant part: the turf was alive. The grass on the outer surface continued growing, creating a self-repairing, living roof and walls that actually got stronger over time as roots intertwined. The roof design was equally ingenious. Vikings would create a wooden frame, often shaped like an upside-down boat hull, reflecting their legendary shipbuilding expertise. Over this frame, they'd lay birch bark for waterproofing, then pile on layers of turf. The result: a roof that could be 2 feet thick, covered in living grass that provided superior insulation, natural waterproofing, wind resistance, camouflage that blended into the landscape, and additional grazing land for sheep in summer. Some turf roofs were so sturdy that families could walk on them, and sheep often grazed on the rooftops. Imagine looking at a Viking settlement and seeing sheep casually eating grass on someone's roof. That's the ultimate in sustainable, multi-purpose design. Inside, turf houses were surprisingly sophisticated. Despite the thick walls and small windows, Vikings created functional living spaces that served multiple purposes. The central feature was always the long fire pit or hearth, running down the middle of the main hall. This wasn't just for cooking. The fire provided heat for the entire dwelling, light during dark winter months, a cooking surface, a social gathering point, and smoke that would rise and escape through a hole in the roof, helping to preserve food hanging from rafters. Along the walls, Vikings built raised platforms that served as benches during the day and beds at night. These raised sleeping areas kept people off the cold floor and closer to the warm air that naturally rises. Storage was built into the thick walls themselves. Vikings created niches and alcoves within those massive turf walls for storing food, tools, and treasured possessions. Some larger turf houses featured multiple rooms. The main hall for living, eating, and socializing. A separate sleeping chamber for privacy. A storage room for food preservation. Sometimes even a small attached barn for valuable livestock. Now let's talk about why these turf houses were so effective at keeping Vikings alive through brutal winters. Those thick turf walls weren't just insulation. They provided something called thermal mass. During the day, when the fire was burning and people were active, the walls would slowly absorb heat. At night, when the fire died down, those walls would gradually release that stored heat back into the living space. This created remarkably stable interior temperatures. While outside temperatures might swing 40 degrees between day and night, inside a turf house, temperatures would vary by maybe 5 to 10 degrees. Modern studies of reconstructed turf houses show that even in sub-zero weather, without any heating, the interior temperature stays above freezing. With a small fire, you could maintain comfortable temperatures around 15 to 20 degrees Celsius. But here's a problem. How do you prevent a house made of earth and grass from becoming a moldy, damp nightmare? Vikings solved this through clever ventilation. That smoke hole in the roof wasn't just for smoke. It created a natural airflow that pulled moisture-laden air out of the dwelling. Fresh air entered through the door and small ventilation gaps rose as it warmed and exited through the roof. The turf walls themselves were breathable, allowing moisture to slowly evaporate outward while preventing rain from penetrating inward. This natural moisture management system worked remarkably well. A well-built turf house could last 20 to 40 years before major repairs were needed. The living grass roof actually helped. As long as it kept growing, the roots held everything together and prevented erosion. Vikings would perform regular maintenance, replacing damaged turf sections, reinforcing walls before winter, clearing roof drainage, and ensuring the grass stayed healthy. When a turf house finally reached the end of its life, it simply decomposed back into the landscape. Zero waste. Completely biodegradable. The ultimate in sustainable architecture. Here's what makes this story even more remarkable. Turf houses didn't disappear into history. In Iceland, people were still building and living in turf houses into the early 20th century. Some structures from the 1700s and 1800s still exist today and are remarkably well preserved. And now, in our age of climate crisis and energy concerns, architects and engineers are rediscovering what Vikings knew 1,000 years ago. Modern earth-sheltered homes use the same principles. Building partially underground for natural insulation using thermal mass to stabilize temperatures, creating living roofs for insulation, and water management working with the landscape instead of against it. These contemporary earth-sheltered homes can reduce heating and cooling costs by 50 to 90% compared to conventional houses. They're incredibly durable, naturally disaster-resistant, and environmentally sustainable. Vikings figured this out with no engineering degrees, no computer models, and no modern technology. Just observation, experimentation, and the desperate need to survive. The turf house represents something profound about human ingenuity. When faced with an environment that should have been uninhabitable, Vikings didn't give up. They didn't just barely survive. They thrived, building homes so effective that they're now inspiring solutions to modern problems. So the next time someone mentions Vikings, remember, they weren't just warriors and explorers. They were master engineers who literally built homes from the earth itself and conquered the most brutal winters on the planet. If you found this fascinating, you need to subscribe to FROSTIVIAN. We explore how humans have survived and thrived in the most extreme environments throughout history. Hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and drop a comment telling me, what ancient survival technology should we explore next?